The music was loud, the laughter louder, but Chase Donovan barely heard any of it. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, a half-full glass of bourbon in his hand, watching the city lights blur into abstract lines. People moved behind him, beautiful and important, the kind of guests expected at parties thrown by billionaires. His jaw was tight, his eyes unfocused. "I will marry the woman I sleep with tonight," he said. The words dropped like a stone into a crowded pool. Silence followed, sharp and brief, before the crowd responded the way it always did, around Chase Donovan, with laughter. His friends laughed, his assistant laughed, even the woman in the red dress standing closest to him chuckled and leaned in like he had just made the most charming joke of the evening. But Chase was not smiling. Across the room by the bar, a woman's head tilted slightly. She had not laughed. Her name was Cora Evans, and she was not supposed to be there. A friend from her neighborhood had begged her to come as moral support. "It's for a literacy fundraiser," they said. "Come for an hour, pretend to network, maybe charm a few donors." But Cora had no desire to charm anyone. She sipped her water and watched Chase from a distance. There was something brittle about the way he stood, something fractured just beneath the surface. The kind of look that reminded her of herself years ago, standing at the foot of a hospital bed, pretending not to break. She looked away before their eyes could meet. Chase didn't notice her. Not yet. He turned back to the room, lifted his glass higher, and repeated it. "I will marry the woman I sleep with tonight. No prenup, no negotiations, no games." There it was again. This time, people really listened. Some clapped, others rolled their eyes. A few whispered to each other with raised eyebrows, already trying to guess who he would leave with. Chase downed the rest of his bourbon and walked away from the window. He didn't care if they believed him. In fact, he hoped they didn't. This wasn't a declaration made in joy or hope. It was made in exhaustion, in heartbreak, in spite. 3 weeks ago, his engagement had fallen apart. The woman he thought he would marry told him he was incapable of intimacy. She had said he was good at giving gifts, not himself. That he didn't love people, only acquired them. Her words had stuck. They had burrowed under his skin, whispering in every quiet moment. So tonight, surrounded by excess, Chase Donovan decided to rebel against his own numbness. If he could not feel love, then he would surrender to the next best thing. He would make it transactional, immediate, final. He had no idea that somewhere in the room was a woman who had once promised herself she would never belong to a man who didn't mean forever. A woman who had guarded her heart, her body, her trust, like fragile glass. He didn't see her then, but he would. And when he did everything he thought he understood about choices, about consequences, about connection, would shatter. It would start with a glance, end with blood on white sheets. And somewhere in between, two people would meet at the edge of everything they feared. And for one night, one decision, neither of them would be the same again. Chase Donovan did not believe in chance. He believed in algorithms, projections, calculated risks, and structured outcomes. That was how he built his empire, from a cluttered dorm room at Stanford to a Manhattan tower with his name on half the patents inside. Chase had spent his entire adult life in pursuit of certainty. Control was his comfort. Data was his truth. And yet, for all his numbers and precision, something about that night, about the weight of those words he had spoken, felt beyond calculation. He kept scanning the room, not entirely sure what he was looking for, only knowing he hadn't found it yet. He didn't realize that sometimes the most important moments in life don't arrive with clarity. They arrive quietly disguised as accidents. Cora Evans did not believe in men like Chase Donovan. Not because she disliked wealth or ambition, but because she had seen what unchecked power did to people. Her last job had ended when she walked out of a publishing internship after her supervisor leaned too close, one too many times. He was respected, generous with praise in public, and manipulative in private. When she finally filed a complaint, HR called it a misunderstanding and offered to reassign her elsewhere. She never returned. Since then, she had avoided anything that smelled of high society or power games. That night, she had come only because her friend promised the event was for charity, that it would be low pressure, and that she wouldn't be alone. Yet the moment she stepped into that gleaming penthouse, Cora felt out of place. Not because of the clothes, her simple black dress was tasteful if understated, but because of the invisible air that hovered between the guests. They belonged to each other. She belonged to nowhere. Cora had grown up on the edge of the city in a small two-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother until the cancer took her. They were close, closer than most. Her mother had taught her to read, to cook, to speak her mind, and guard her heart. When she died, Cora stopped applying for full-time jobs and started volunteering at the local library. It was quiet work often overlooked, but it gave her a sense of usefulness. She curated story hours for children, repaired donated books with glue and care, and ran small workshops on poetry for teenagers who didn't know how to say what they felt. She liked it. It was safe, predictable. No suits, no boardrooms, no lies masked as opportunity. But sometimes at night, Cora lay awake, wondering if safety was just another kind of loneliness. That night, while Chase wandered through the crowd of silk dresses and designer watches pretending to enjoy the event, Cora stood near the book display set up for the literacy fundraiser. She had helped select the titles earlier that week, memoirs by marginalized authors, children's books from immigrant voices, stories that didn't always end in happily ever afters. She preferred books that made people uncomfortable, books that said something real. The kind Chase Donovan had probably never read. When he finally noticed her, it wasn't dramatic. There was no music shift, no slow-motion turn. He simply walked past the display, glanced at her, and paused. Not because she was the most beautiful woman in the room, though she was striking in her own way, but because she wasn't watching him. Everyone else was. She was reading the back of a hardcover edition of a novel he had never heard of. He stepped closer, curious, as if drawn by something he couldn't quite name. She looked up, surprised, guarded. He nodded at the book in her hand. "Is it good?" he asked. She shrugged. "It's honest," she said. "That's better than good." That response startled him. Most people tried to impress him. She didn't. He tilted his head. "Do you work in publishing?" She shook her head. "I used to. Now I work with books that can't be sold but still deserve to be read." He smiled. "That sounds poetic." She gave a soft laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "It's just the truth." There was a pause, the kind that could lead in any direction. He could have walked away. She could have turned back to her book, but neither did. They stood there, strangers suspended in a moment neither of them understood yet. Chase, for the first time in a long while, didn't feel the need to prove anything. Cora, against her instincts, didn't feel the urge to run. And in that strange, quiet stillness between two people who had every reason to ignore each other, something unspoken began. Not desire, not yet. Something smaller. Curiosity wrapped in hesitation. He extended his hand. "Chase." She hesitated, then took it, "Cora." And just like that, a line was drawn in the evening. Before this moment, and everything that would come after. They didn't speak for long at first. Chase was pulled away by someone from the tech press, and Cora returned to the book table, pretending to rearrange stacks that were already perfectly aligned. But something had shifted. She felt it in the way her hands trembled, just slightly, in the way her breath caught, whenever she thought she might feel his gaze again from across the room. She hated herself for it. She didn't know him. He was rich, careless, probably used to collecting phone numbers like trophies. And yet, he had asked about the book, not her dress or her name. He had listened to her answer. That alone made him different from half the men she had ever met. Still, it wasn't enough. 30 minutes later, he found her again. This time, without the crowd. He looked less polished up close, like the weight of hosting had started to dull the sharp edges of his suit. She was leaning against a balcony railing, watching the city breathe below. He stepped beside her, offering a drink. She shook her head. "I don't drink with strangers," she said. "Then let's fix that," he replied. "Tell me something about you. Something real." She hesitated. "My mother died a year ago. Cancer. I haven't let anyone into my apartment since." He blinked. "That's real," he said softly. She nodded. "Now your turn." He leaned on the railing, looking straight ahead. "I built something worth billions, lost someone I was supposed to marry, and tonight I said something I shouldn't have." Cora turned to face him. "The marriage thing." He nodded. "Was it a joke?" "No," he said. "It was stupid, but not a joke." She studied him, her expression unreadable. "And what if the woman you sleep with tonight doesn't want to be a wife?" He looked at her, really looked. "Then I'll be the one who regrets more than just the words." There was a beat of silence. The city roared beneath them. Somewhere in the distance a siren wailed, and a train rattled through steel bones. But here, between two people neither lost nor found, there was stillness. Cora spoke first. "I don't do nights like this. I don't do impulsive." "Neither do I," he said. "But tonight, I feel like I might forget how to breathe if I don't ask you to stay." It was not a pickup line. It was not smooth. It was raw, almost embarrassed by its own honesty. She folded her arms, narrowing her eyes. "Why me?" "Because you're not pretending to want something you don't. And I need someone who sees through the noise." She wanted to walk away. She should have. Every voice in her head warned her, but there was a softness in his tone, a fragility behind the bravado. She had seen broken men before. They masked it with aggression, manipulation, silence. Chase masked his with too much openness, like a child asking someone to prove him wrong. Cora took a slow breath. "One night, no promises, no pretending." "No pretending," he echoed. "I swear." The drive back to his penthouse was quiet. She watched the city pass by in flickers of gold and shadow. He glanced at her once but didn't speak. When they arrived, she stepped inside, first shoes clicking against marble, heart thudding like a warning. He offered her water, a blanket space. She accepted all three. They talked first. For hours. About books that changed their lives. About how grief rewrites the language of everyday things. About why silence can sometimes feel louder than pain. When he touched her hand, it was tentative. When she didn't pull away, he exhaled. The rest came slowly, carefully. No music, no champagne, no promises. Just two people trying to find a rhythm that didn't feel forced. His hands were warm. Hers shook. She whispered once, almost too quietly, "I've never done this." He paused, searching her face. "Never." She nodded. "I've waited because I thought I would know when it felt right." And now, he asked, barely breathing. "Now I'm scared," she said. "But I don't want to run." He kissed her then, not with urgency, but with reverence, as if she were a secret the world had tried to bury. She let herself be held, not owned. She let herself feel, not perform. And when it was over, she lay beside him, in the hush that follows something fragile. He was already asleep, his breathing even. She stared at the ceiling tears slipping quietly into her hair. She rose before dawn. The apartment was still. She dressed without sound, folding the borrowed blanket, setting her untouched glass of water on the kitchen counter. Then she saw it. The blood on the sheets. A small, undeniable stain. It jolted her. Not from shame, not from regret, but from the sudden realization that this man, this stranger, had taken something she had protected for so long. And yet, it hadn't felt like loss. It had felt like surrender, like a door opening she hadn't known was locked. Still, she couldn't stay. She left a note. No name, no contact. Just words that felt like both apology and boundary. You are kind, but I can't afford to be someone's regret. Please don't find me. Then she stepped into the elevator, her heart thudding against the walls of her ribs. By the time the city swallowed her again, the sun was beginning to rise, and somewhere in that penthouse, Chase Donovan would wake to a white sheet and a smear of blood that would haunt him far more than the silence that followed. When Chase awoke, the first thing he noticed was the stillness, the kind that doesn't belong to mornings after a party, the kind that whispers something is missing. He reached across the bed instinctively, but there was no warmth, no presence, only fabric and absence. Then he saw it. A stain on the sheet, small but stark against the white. For a moment, he blinked, thinking maybe it was a spill wine perhaps, or something forgotten. But as his mind cleared, the shape, the color, the weight of what it meant settled over him like a punch to the chest. He sat up. There was no note on the pillow, no trace of perfume, only a folded blanket on the armchair, a glass of water left untouched on the counter, and on the kitchen island, a square of paper with handwriting he didn't recognize. You are kind, but I can't afford to be someone's regret. Please don't find me. That was all it said. Nothing else. No name, no number. As if she had disappeared from the world. Chase stood in the center of his apartment, the silence pressing against his ears. The party had ended, the guests long gone, but this, the echo of her leaving, felt louder than anything the music had been. He read the note again. Her words were careful, deliberate. This wasn't someone running from a mistake. This was someone walking away with intention. That terrified him more than he could admit. He didn't even know her last name. He didn't know where she lived, what she did, who she was outside that moment on the balcony. And yet he had felt more seen in one night than in years of relationships and boardrooms and elegant dinners. The stain on the sheets haunted him. Not because of what it meant physically, but because of what it might mean emotionally. Had she trusted him with something she hadn't given anyone else? Had he unknowingly crossed a line she'd drawn in silence? For the next 2 days, Chase barely slept. He went through every guest list from the party, spoke to the event planner, the caterers, the photographer. He asked subtle questions, watched security footage. Then he saw her, slipping out of the building in the early morning, wearing the same black dress, her hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck. She didn't run. She didn't look back. Just walked into the dawn like she had somewhere to be and no one to explain herself to. He paused the footage, zoomed in on her face. There was something unreadable in her eyes. Not sadness, not shame, more like release. She had given something and chosen to leave before it could be taken from her. Eventually, through a friend of the event sponsor, he found a name. Cora Evans, volunteer librarian, former publishing intern, lived in Harlem. He went to the library on 121st Street 3 times before someone confirmed she no longer worked there. Just helped on weekends when she could. No one knew much. She was kind, quiet, smart, kept to herself. He left his number, just in case. Then he went home and tried to return to his routines. Meetings, calls, deadlines. But nothing felt quite real. Everything had a layer of static over it. He kept replaying their conversation, her voice, the softness behind her words, the slight tremble in her laugh. He kept wondering what kind of courage it took to walk away from someone like him without leaving anything to chase. Meanwhile, Cora tried to forget. She returned to the small apartment she had once shared with her mother. She cleaned obsessively, cooked meals she didn't eat, tried to go back to the quiet she had cultivated so carefully. But silence no longer comforted her. It accused her. Every room reminded her of the moment she let herself feel something and then abandoned it. Not because she regretted it, but because she was terrified it would change her. She hadn't cried the morning she left, not even when she saw the blood. She had stood in the mirror, her reflection still and pale, and whispered, "I chose this." She had chosen it, but that didn't mean it hadn't shaken her. Cora had grown up with boundaries. Her mother had taught her early that her body was hers, that intimacy wasn't currency, and that some things should be sacred even when the world tried to take them. She believed that, carried it with her like armor. She wasn't religious, but there had been something holy in her decision to wait, to not give herself to someone who didn't truly see her. And that night, when Chase looked at her like she was a person, not a project, not a prize, she had let her guard down. Not because he was perfect, but because he wasn't pretending. He didn't try to charm her. He didn't ask for more than she offered, and that made her feel safe. For the first time in years, she had wanted to be touched. Not claimed, not convinced, just touched. She hadn't told him the truth, that he had been her first, that no one else had ever known her like that. It hadn't felt necessary in the moment, but in the quiet aftermath, it felt like a secret that weighed too much. So she had left. Not in shame, in protection. She didn't want him to wake up and see the blood and feel obligated. She didn't want to become a responsibility born from a reckless promise. She wanted that night to stay pure, undiluted by awkward apologies or expectations. But she had not expected the ache that followed. The ache of leaving without being asked to stay. 3 weeks passed. Cora stopped going to the library, stopped checking her email. She walked the city with headphones and music loud enough to drown her thoughts. But they still followed. Every corner reminded her. Every book cover on the subway. Every skyline against sunset glass. She began to wonder if maybe she hadn't just walked away from a man, but from the possibility of something she had stopped believing in. Something like intimacy without loss. Something like love without fear. Then one afternoon, she found an envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside was a small card. The cover was blank. Inside, one sentence, handwritten. "You looked like someone who hadn't been seen in a long time. I see you." There was no signature, but she knew. The handwriting was Chase's. She had seen it on a scribbled cocktail napkin he used to mark a passage in a book they talked about that night. She had laughed when she read it. Now she cried. She didn't call, not yet. But she folded the card and placed it inside a worn paperback she had read every year on her birthday. It was a ritual of hers, one that had always felt lonely. Now it felt like a door cracking open. The air behind it unfamiliar, but not unfriendly. She stood at the threshold of that space for a long time, holding the memory of one night that had changed everything, and wondering if maybe, just maybe, it wasn't over yet. The decision to find her again was not made with a burst of inspiration, but with a quiet, persistent ache that refused to fade. Chase had spent weeks convincing himself to let her go, telling himself that one night should not matter this much. But every time he saw a book on someone's desk or walked past a library window, her face returned. Every moment of stillness whispered her name, not as a haunting, but as a question he could no longer ignore. He did not want to chase her out of guilt. He wanted to chase her because something about her had made him honest, and he had not felt honest in years. He found her at a small community library in the Bronx, not through assistance or surveillance, but by chance. He had begun volunteering through one of his company's low-profile outreach programs. He wanted less noise, fewer curated conversations. On a gray Thursday afternoon, he walked into the back room of the library carrying a box of refurbished tablets, and there she was, sitting cross-legged on the floor helping a child repair a torn page from a book on African folktales. She didn't see him at first. He stood frozen, unsure of whether to speak or turn around and walk away. But the moment she looked up, their eyes met, and everything they had left unsaid surged between them in the space of a single heartbeat. Cora's face went still. She didn't smile, didn't flinch. She simply stared at him like he was someone she had imagined and was now unsure how to place. He took a step forward. "Hi," he said quietly. She stood slowly, brushing invisible dust from her jeans. "You found me. I wasn't looking for you like that," he said. "I just needed to see you." She didn't respond right away. The child she had been helping wandered off to another room. For a moment, it was just the two of them surrounded by quiet books and the smell of old paper. "You sent me a card," she said finally. "I did." "Why?" "Because I meant it. I see you. I saw you that night, and I still do." She nodded, then crossed her arms. "What do you want, Chase?" He breathed in. "I want to apologize, not for that night. I don't regret it, but for letting you walk away without asking what it meant to you. I want to know what you carried after that, what I didn't get to hear." Her arms dropped slowly. Her face softened, but only a little. "It meant more than I wanted it to. That's why I left." He took another step. "You didn't trust that it was real." "I didn't trust myself," she said. "I thought if I stayed, you'd say something that would turn it into regret. I needed it to remain mine, untouched by explanation. Then, let me ask now, what did it mean to you?" She looked at him, her voice low and even. "It was the first time I chose to give something I had spent years guarding. Not just my body, my vulnerability, my silence. I wasn't scared of you. I was scared of what it would do to me if I gave all that to someone who couldn't hold it." He exhaled. "I can hold it. I couldn't then because I didn't know what it was. But now I do. And I'm here. Not to take anything from you, just to sit beside it." She stepped back. "Don't make this poetic, Chase. This isn't a movie." "I'm not trying to be poetic," he said. "I'm trying to be accountable." She stared at him for a long time. Then she walked past him toward the door. He turned, prepared for goodbye, but she stopped, looked back and said, "I'm off at 6. They met later that evening at a quiet diner 3 blocks away. No cameras, no wine lists, just mismatched booths and the hum of an old jukebox. They didn't touch, didn't lean in. They talked. About the aftermath, about how Cora had almost told her friend but couldn't find the words, about how Chase had tried to move on and failed. He told her about the blood on the sheets, about how he stood there for 10 minutes trying to understand what it meant. It wasn't shame, she said. I need you to know that. I didn't cry because I felt ruined. I cried because I didn't want you to see me differently. I saw you, he said, and I still do. You are not something that happened to me. You're someone I'm still learning how to stand next to. The diner was quiet when they left. The sky was dark, but the air was warm. They didn't hold hands. They walked side by side, the silence no longer a barrier, but a bridge. When they reached the corner, she turned to him. I don't know what this is. I'm still figuring it out. Me too, he said. Then don't rush me. I won't. Don't try to fix me. I wouldn't dare. She laughed, soft and surprised by herself. Then maybe we can see what's underneath the fear. He nodded. Maybe we can. They started meeting twice a week. No labels, no expectations, just coffee and conversation. Sometimes they walked, sometimes they read, sometimes they sat in silence. It wasn't a romance in the way people wrote them. It was quieter, messier, but real. Chase started reading the books she loved. Cora began attending tech talks he invited her to, sitting in the back, curious about the world he had built. They learned each other's languages. She told him about her mother, about the apartment that still felt like a tomb. He told her about his father, who had left when he was 10, and how he had chased success, hoping to fill that void. They didn't kiss again for months, and when they finally did, it was not passion that led them there. It was patience. One evening, she took him to the cemetery where her mother was buried. She placed a hand on the headstone and whispered, He doesn't complete me, but he stays. And that matters. Chase didn't speak. He simply stood beside her, letting the moment unfold without commentary. Later, back at her apartment, she handed him the book where she had tucked his card. He opened it and found a note folded beside it, her handwriting careful and clear. Maybe you weren't a mistake. Maybe you were the door. He looked up, his eyes full. Can I stay tonight? She nodded. You can, but not for the same reasons. No, he said, for better ones. That night when they lay beside each other, there was no rush, no ache to fill silence, only the quiet relief of two people who had finally let themselves be fully seen. And this time, when the morning came, Cora did not disappear. She stayed, with both eyes open, and Chase, for the first time in his life, woke up to something he didn't want to escape. He reached for her hand. She let him. No words, no promises, just presence. And it was enough. Their lives did not change in a cinematic montage. There was no swelling soundtrack, no sequence of picture-perfect moments unfolding in soft focus. Instead, change came like it often does in real life, through the quiet negotiation of trust, the slow stitching of new habits, the delicate dance of learning how to stay. Cora and Chase kept their relationship private, not because they were ashamed, but because it was still being built, and neither of them wanted it dissected by others before it could stand on its own. They met often, sometimes at the diner, sometimes at her apartment, rarely at his. His penthouse still carried the ghost of that night, the memory of what had begun without either of them knowing how much it would cost. Cora told him she was not ready to step into that space again. Not yet. He didn't push her. He understood that healing did not move at the pace of desire. But the outside world, with all its opinions and expectations, began to creep in. One morning, Chase woke up to an email from a gossip columnist. A blurry photo had been published online, Cora walking beside him outside a bookstore, their shoulders close, their heads tilted in quiet conversation. The headline was careless and cruel. Billionaire's mystery woman rebound, or real thing. Within hours, his office was flooded with inquiries. Investors asked if he was planning to go public with the relationship. Board members subtly reminded him of the importance of image. Even his assistant Daniel looked nervous when handing him the morning briefing. Cora saw the article before he did. She didn't say anything at first. She just sent him a text that read, "Is this what it's going to be like now?" He called her immediately. "I didn't leak it," he said. "I know," she replied. "But you don't have to leak something for it to become public. Just being near you is enough." Her voice was calm, but he could hear the distance forming. "Let me fix it," he said. "Don't," she answered. "Don't turn me into a campaign. I'm not a redemption arc." For the first time since they reconnected, they spent several days apart. Cora withdrew into herself, avoiding calls, skipping their usual meetups. Chase respected her space, but the silence weighed heavy. He started questioning everything. Had he asked too much just by loving her? Had his presence poisoned the peace she had worked so hard to build? One afternoon, she showed up at his office unannounced. Daniel looked surprised, even nervous, but waved her through. Chase stood when she entered, unsure of what to expect. She was wearing a dark coat, her expression unreadable. "I saw the follow-up article," she said. "They printed my name this time." "I'm sorry," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here." He gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing. "I need you to understand something, Chase. I've spent most of my adult life trying not to be seen. Not because I don't want connection, but because I'm afraid that the second I am truly visible, someone will try to own me." He nodded slowly. "I don't want to own you. I believe you. But the world doesn't know how to love a woman who chooses herself first. And I've worked too hard to lose that just because someone took our picture." He moved toward her carefully. "Then what do we do?" She sighed. "We slow down. We go quieter. Not because we're hiding, but because we're protecting something sacred." "I'll do whatever it takes," he said. "I just don't want to lose you." Her face softened. "You're not losing me. But you have to stop trying to rescue me. I'm not a story that needs rewriting. I'm a person still writing her own pages." They didn't kiss. They didn't make promises. She just reached out and touched his hand. And that was enough to remind them both that love didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered and still changed everything. The weeks that followed were quieter. They stopped posting on social media. Chase stepped back from public events. Cora continued her work at the library, joined a program for mentoring young women, and began writing again essays and letters and pieces she never planned to publish. It helped her process. One evening, while sorting old donations at the library, she came across a copy of the same novel she had been holding the night they met. She opened it and found a note tucked inside. Different handwriting, from someone else who had loved the book before. It read, "This story reminded me that sometimes we choose to run, not because we don't love, but because we do." That line echoed in her mind for days. She brought it up during a walk with Chase through Central Park. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the night I left. I think about it too, he said. I wasn't scared of you, she continued. I was scared of how easily you saw through me, and how much I wanted to be seen. You were brave, he said. You gave me more honesty in one night than I've had in years. She smiled gently. I'm still scared, but I'm learning to stay. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Then let me stay with you, wherever that takes us. Even if it's slow, even if it's messy. She nodded. But not in that penthouse. Not yet. We'll burn the sheets, he said. She laughed, not at the joke, but at the fact that he remembered. Deal. As fall approached, their rhythm deepened. They spent weekends at bookstores, attended community events, even co-hosted a children's story hour together. Chase read with an awkward charm that made the kids giggle. Cora watched him with a quiet fondness she didn't try to explain. One Saturday evening, as they closed the library, he looked at her across the checkout counter and said, You never told me what you wrote in that letter you left the morning after. She looked up thoughtful. Because it wasn't a letter. It was a line I couldn't say aloud. But I can now. He waited. She met his eyes. I wasn't leaving you. I was leaving the version of me that didn't think she deserved to stay. His expression broke. Not with tears, but with recognition. The kind that comes from finally understanding something you've been chasing in the dark. He walked around the counter, took her hand, and pressed it to his chest. No words. Just that steady beat beneath her palm. She rested her forehead against his shoulder, and together, in the quiet hum of a closing library, they held space for the parts of themselves that had been lost and were now at last beginning to come home. 1 year later, the library was different. The walls were painted in soft colors. The lighting was warmer. A new section called Eleanor's Corner had been added, filled with donated books by women authors, carefully curated and cataloged by Cora herself. At the entrance, a small brass plaque read, In honor of stories that heal us before they save us. Children ran through the aisles laughing. Parents sat in circles for weekend read-alouds. And in the back near the tall windows that faced the park, Cora and Chase sat together, reviewing a program proposal for a storytelling workshop she had designed for teenage girls. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same notebook, but they didn't look up. They didn't need to. Touch no longer startled them. Intimacy had become ordinary, a language they spoke fluently now without needing translation. They had never moved in together. They had never posted an anniversary photo. They had not built a brand or a story for anyone else's consumption. What they had was quieter, rooted not in declarations, but in consistency. He still lived in the city, ran his company, made headlines from time to time. She still kept her world small, intentional, private. And yet every night they found their way back to each other, whether in person over the phone or through a shared book waiting on the nightstand. They didn't rush anything. They didn't label their future. But in the spaces where they once held fear, they now held room. Room for change. Room for silence. Room for each other. On the anniversary of the night they met, Chase handed her a wrapped package. No bow, no card. Just a simple box. Inside was a hardcover book with a handwritten title, The Morning After. She opened it and found the first page covered in his handwriting. It wasn't a story. It was a letter. I thought I had lost you before I even had the right to want you. But what I didn't realize that night was that love isn't proven in the moment someone stays. It's proven in the moment someone comes back different, slower, stronger, and ready. You made me ready. She closed the book slowly. Her eyes wet her hands, trembling slightly the way they had that first night on the balcony. He reached for her, and she leaned in without hesitation. You didn't fix me, she whispered. You made space for me to fix myself. I didn't know how to love until you taught me, he said. I didn't teach you, she replied. I just let you watch me remember how. Outside, the city moved the way it always did, fast, chaotic, uncaring. But inside that library, something different held its shape. A rhythm created by two people who had every reason to protect themselves, but chose to be brave instead. Their love was not perfect. It was not without memory or scar. But it was real. And it was enough. Because some stories don't begin the moment people meet. Some stories begin the moment they stop running. And some of the most beautiful love stories begin not with I love you, but with I see you, and I'm staying.